a fresh experience. No one has made sense of what's going on. The whole coronavirus the epidemic is so weird that we haven't even told proper jokes about it because everyone's still, in theory, locked in, even though things are slowly getting back to normal. So this is an interesting take because I hadn't really considered some of the points that you raised. And also, why is everyone being awkward about like the whole Chinese aspect? Because at one point, people couldn't even say that. Someone ate a deep fried bat, someone ate bat chow mein, and then, what would you call it? What would you call the dish?
Kung Pao bat.
Rich, I'm going to be honest. There's some of this podcast you can't broadcast, okay?
Right.
We can't talk about bat chow mein on the internet, okay? Because people... Nelson, this is a tense time for the white man as much as anyone, okay? Stop yelling bat chow mein, okay? I'm trying so hard. Right, okay. Right. Nelson, shut the fuck up. Right, here's a couple of things you need to know. I haven't spoken to a human soul who hasn't been related to me or I'm having consensual sex with for 4 months, right? Okay. And in that time, I haven't been racist at all because I haven't spoken to anyone, right? And now Black Lives Matter has kicked off in a big way. So for people like me, this is a big time for me to make sure that I'm on the right side, brackets, the left side of history, okay? So let's not start talking about bat chow mein, okay? Okay, 'cause I've already got one race to deal with. I can't deal with two, okay? It's one at a time. There's a queuing system.
I want to know, though. Okay. That's true. Let's not call it that. But they must have a name for the dish. You know, you call it something. No, but a cow, you don't for
Oh my God.
No, but he's right. It's not racist if you use the right dish name.
That's what I want to know. When I know the right dish name.
Oh God.
No, because I want to know. Racism comes from the lack of knowledge. I educate myself. I'm trying to know the name of the dish.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. I don't know.
So that I can call it its rightful name so that I don't come off as being offensive. Because
yeah, I know. I just want to write like a post-it note on like on my shirt that just says, like, I know this conversation was a problem and I did my best, like exclamation mark.
This is why this podcast is going to be good, because this is raw, unfiltered, but every thought must be justified. Every view must be justified. And I feel like we can't really edit too much. We need to give people what's real. And why should the conversation be taboo? I mean, I'll change the conversation topic in a second, but
I get what you mean. I do, like, I genuinely get the point with, like, and I think probably it's because no one really knows anything about China. I think Western culture is obviously, I think very much obviously like based in the West. We deal with like our celebrity culture and our social culture, etc., etc., etc. It's like I never even consider like any culture in any like Asian or Oriental or hell, like even Australia, like anything like east of Poland, like I don't even think of like as in any sort of like social relation to me. And I think that's probably the reason why, is because news is only like, it's Western themed, like the whole thing is Western themed. And then China is like some faraway land in like Lord of the Rings, and it makes loads of plastic. And that's all I know about it. It makes loads of plastic, and I know that the takeaway apparently doesn't taste like authentic Chinese food. And that's all I know.
If coronavirus originated in Paris, the bet would probably be something celebrated like...
Oh, like, it also wouldn't be called coronavirus. It would be like virus de la corona, and it would sound amazing and be very tasty. That was, hey, but this is like, this is what I was thinking about during lockdown, right? So my first ex-girlfriend's, her mum, she was one of those people that if they had like a foreign food, but only of specific countries, or like a foreign delicacy, they would pronounce it in the appropriate accent. So typically, she was a big fan of chorizo and anything French. She would be like, fruit de la mer, right? What I don't understand is why it's only certain countries that get the correct pronunciation. Like, you would never, like, I would sooner die than pronounce, like, for example, an Indian takeaway in quotes an authentic Indian accent, because like it would, like, my life would sooner be over. But then apparently, like, if it's Spanish, it's completely okay to just be like, blah 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 blah, pasta. I know, right? Or like Italy. Like, Italy's like classic. I go to Italy quite a lot, and my mum will be like, "Oh, we should have some aglio and pep, you know, or whatever." But like, I would never do that. I would never do that if I went to like, like, oh my god, I don't know.
So here's the thing I find interesting about this whole race conversation is the things that we think are racist in our head are not really racist. Like, if you tried to pronounce an Indian dish, I don't think that would be racist. It would be funny, but I don't think it would come from a point of hate or ridicule or anything. It would just be coming from, I'm trying to do the best I can, you know? And with this PC culture, it really annoys me that you can't be authentic like that. You know what I'm saying?
That's not, I don't think it is authentic to go to an Indian restaurant and then speak normally and then necessarily then be like, yeah, mate, I would want like 2 Heinekens, and then unload in your authentic Indian accent, your authentic Indian meal. Especially where I live, there's nothing authentic about my Indian takeaway.
Authentic is probably not the right word, but it's not racist. That's all I'm saying. It's not, right? Unless you were like, then it would be racist, right? But if you're just being like pretentious, that's different, you know? Maybe it's pretentious, it's still not racist, you know?
What if you have learned how to pronounce it? So you're like,
right. Again, that's pretentious. It's not racist.
Hello, sir.
I mean, for me, as a white man, I just steer clear. I know that if I pronounce everything in my own accent, I'm not going to get into any sort of hot water. So I will just...
for white people right now.
It's easier, and everyone's stressed. Everyone's very tense. So I'm not going to try and ruin anything because I want to order my takeaways differently. Okay, we're all very happy here. Yeah, although we had, to be fair, actually this evening, literally like an hour ago, we had Chinese takeaway, and I got into the takeaway shop to collect it all, and I was on the phone. I was like, "Oh, I'm very pleased because social distancing is being adhered to," and like all the staff looked at me just like, "Okay," because I was the only one in there, and they didn't find it remotely funny. I think they just thought I was really strange. But there we go. You know, that's my first gig in 3 months. 12 seconds of Chinese takeaway.
Let's seg, yeah. So you're here to talk about crowd work.
Yeah.
Apparently you are the master. You know, normally with this segment, we kind of just talk about, you know, one joke and how you do it. But with the crowd work, I mean, why don't we just go with, how do you do it? I mean, what is your process when you start to do crowd work?
Okay.
How do you think of it?
So that's very kind of Nelson to say I'm the master. I think probably in my postcode is more accurate. But so I do a lot of hosting. So I host Gonzo's with Nelson. So that's how I got into it, and I'm chatty, and I usually say something which isn't quite right socially anyway. So I've always spent a lot of time on the defensive. I mean, the previous 30 minutes of conversation we've had is probably a classic example of tension that I feel on a day-to-day basis with other people. And then, so I mean, the crowd generally in a gig setting, you will obviously have very standard things that you will know what to say. And that will be like, obviously, if they're a doctor, or if they're this, or if they're that, or if there's a group of lads and they're having a few drinks, they're obviously like your standard, like you'll be like, oh, okay, well, that's the direction there. But with most things, is like your number one job as a host is to make sure everybody is comfortable. And you're not the star of a show. You're there just to make everything feel comfortable, feel pretty, make sure everyone's having a good time. So the reason I really like it is because the pressure's actually completely off. Is that part of your job, apart from obviously ideally to be funny, but it's actually to get to know the people and get that room, which was empty the whole day, it's a basement or whatever, and is now filled with, say, 40, 50 people, is to get that feel like that is a room which is lived in and which has got mutual experiences and stuff like that. So it's about sort of creating like a nice unit of people that can just enjoy everything that's going on. So in terms of crowd work, your objective is to make everybody happy. Then if you can make people laugh as well, that's great. But your number one objective is make sure no one feels uncomfortable. And to do that, there are obviously various things to do. Like, so for example, if I gig with Nelson, if I see any like question marks in the crowd and things that might be a problem. So classic one is if you've got someone that served maybe in like the forces and stuff like that, then you'll highlight that for the rest of comedians because you'll be like, oh, we've got forces here. So maybe you don't crack anything along the lines of like Call of Duty or whatever. But in terms of like actual crowd work, it's, for me, the reason I think I do alright it is because I genuinely like meeting new people and I genuinely want to know what they want to do. And on top of that, I'm very low status and I'm quite sarcastic, which allows me to say things in a way which other comics can't. So because I don't rely on my jokes, I rely on my personality to sort of like shit me through the next sort of 30 seconds or so. So I can make a wrong step, correct it, apologize and move on. And the other thing to do is to make sure you're tying bits of your evening together. So if you meet some, for example, doctors in the front row, and then, actually that's a bad example, I'll give you a real one. So for example, I did a gig about a year ago, and it's the best example for this, is that in the front row there was a pilot. And then we had an act on, and then I spoke to someone in the second row, and they worked at the hotel they're next to the airport. So I was like, oh, you two probably like fly together the whole time. And that wasn't necessarily funny, but it's such a nice connection that people within the room, they recognize that. And like the image of him just like staying in a hotel, collecting his little hotel friend, and then like flying over is humorous. And so people like that kind of stuff. And that's, that's when you achieve stuff. And that's when things begin to become, quite fun and exciting and stuff like that. So I think that's hopefully helpful. I think a lot of that will sound like complete shit, but it's just about basically asking the right questions and being fun / a little positive with it. And then you're good to go.
I gotta say something. Having watched you for years, one of my favorite things that you do is that when you've done like, let's say 5 minutes of crowd work, and then you start connecting all the little bits of stories that you've picked up together. Like, the airport, the hotel. But I was just saying, one of my favorite things that you do is when you connect it all together at the end. So let's say you've picked up a teacher and there's a bus driver and all that stuff. That's always really satisfying to watch. And, I think that you do that really good. Of course, we lost connection there, which is so annoying because we're not all in the same place. So I guess that is bound to happen for the listeners, actually. But essentially what we're talking about is how one of the most satisfying things I have seen is when you put together the tiny bits and stories that you would have collected over the course of the show and then turn it all into one perfectly told thing.
Yeah, I think that's a better way to actually describe it, is that you got lots of different pieces of string and you want to tie them all together. And when people recognize that and they see like what you're doing and like how people that they would never associate themselves with are suddenly friends in that room, that's when you and it's so obviously would never be the case. That's when people enjoy stuff and, you can make some progress, hopefully make them laugh, make a bit of money, have a burger, and give them my Tinder. I don't know what that is. Never used it.
What's been your favorite moments of crowd work so far? Do you have one that stands out?
Uh, oh God. Oh, it feels so long ago now. Pre-corona crowd work. I think I have like certain heckles which I remember and I've enjoyed. I don't think I have any specific ones. I think I've always really enjoyed it when you've had like someone who's really quiet, really shy, and for some fucked up reason they sit on the front row. And that's happened like more times than I can. It's so weird. Like they'll be like right in the middle and they can't look left or right or anything. They're just like, oh, I'm here for comedy, but I haven't smiled since 1997. And you know, at the beginning, like they're so tense, and you want to sort of make sure they're okay. So you ask what they do and if they're okay and stuff like that. You know, and they're so nervous at the beginning, and it's an amazing feeling when you suddenly see them halfway through the show, just like laughing at someone else's joke and like completely relaxed. And I think for me, is because as like any form of like entertainment, like you're booked to entertain, so you know more so than to spill out your views on I don't know, statues or coronavirus, whatever it might be. You're there literally just to make people laugh because they've had a shit day and they've worked 9 to 5 that they hate doing. So to see that makes me really happy and makes me feel like it's worthwhile. And that makes the evening for me.
I think that's the stuff that's the best type of crowd work where it actually has a story. And I think you can either do it when you're doing a very long set or if you're hosting and stuff, because for it to be satisfying, there has to be a gradual growth that the audience is witnessing, a change in energy that everyone else is witnessing in the whole room. And let's say at the end, you get to that special place that everyone's been dying to get to, and then the whole room just laughs in unison. That's the purest.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely what it's all about. And it makes me, and it's just such a highlight for me, or like for anyone. And it's really nice seeing that on longer sets as well from other comics when you see everything come together. I think that's what makes a good Edinburgh show as well. It's like all the great Edinburgh shows I've seen have had like 40 really good minutes, and that final 10, the same with any of the specials you see on Netflix, that final 10, A, brings it all together, but B, it's just, like when it's right, it's so good. It is so good.
It's like it was a build-up. And then,
No, so I love it. I absolutely love it.
More specific questions. Because, okay, if I have never done crowd work before, what is like the first step I should take in order to kind of dip my toes into, trying to practice the craft?
I think actually a lot of it depends on how you write. So for me, how I write is in the old days with comedy gigs, I would write a few bullet points of stuff that I knew that I wanted to talk around. And so usually be a bullet point a gig and then sort of shelve that with older material or older to medium aged material. And then on that bullet point, be like, there's a couple of things that you definitely want to say are definitely funny, but then you obviously have question marks over other stuff. So I'm talking like anecdotal format. Obviously, if you're a one-liner, then it's kind of a different thing. I guess you just spill them all out in one go and see which ones work and which one doesn't, and then rewrite them or whatever. But for me, when I'm doing, like, because I only pretty much do anecdotes, is you got those question marks there. And so for me, at a gig, I try and feel it out and work out which direction to go in. And that is already essentially like a basis of crowd work, because you're essentially trying to improvise like with a topic because you're not quite sure what the right direction to go is. So for me, I'm quite a nervous person, sort of generally. I'm very chatty and I say a lot of words because I'm pretty sure that 45% of what comes out of my mouth is absolute horseshit. So if I've got like a high like word per capita per second, I know that 55% is hopefully of like some sort of substance / low value. So if you're starting out, I think the best way is to sort of work out, first of all, how you write. But second of all, if you're hosting, is to sort of like, I guess, stick to the rules of improv a little bit, just mainly that positive is always good, always say yes. And treat the audience like you treat your friends. So when you see your friends for a drink and you're like, oh, hey, Brian, how are you? And Brian's like, oh, my job sucks. And whatever your conversation with Brian might be, or whoever it is, you have like standard banter with them that you know where that line is. And crowd work is no different from doing that. You're just doing it with a large group of people that you don't know. So I think the thing that's most difficult is that you have to make a snap judgment of people. So you have to be like, okay, that's where their line is. I think these guys' line over here is probably a little bit further because two of them are pissed. One of them looks highly unhealthy in terms of the amount of alcohol he's consumed, and the other two are like a good laugh. But then maybe on your left-hand side, you've got a group of female students who look quite tense, and so you'll know there's certain lines not to cross with them. So really what you're doing is making a snap judgment on your audience, plus you're just treating hopefully everyone in the most positive way. And once you get going, actually it's really easy to work out where the line is because you're just meeting new people. So if you just apply what you do to meet new people to that gig, I think a lot of work there is done. And I'm saying that from my perspective because when I meet new people, I just say a load of random shite, and some of it's funny, some of it's a bit weird, and some of it is very dull. And it's just the hope that hopefully there's more funny stuff and dull stuff, and hopefully no weird stuff in the gig, because that can make a room uneasy. And you just sort of got to go in head first. I mean, there's no real way, I think, probably to teach it. It's just relaxing and also knowing that everyone's on your side as well. Most of the time in a gig, like everyone's there to have a good time.
Yeah.
So if someone's not having a good time, that's because something's gone wrong in the room or something's gone wrong in their day. And that can always be fixed. Very rarely it can't, and that's because like they may have like a very serious like personal issue. They might be unwell or stuff like that. But you usually find people with like more serious like life challenges. That's like when we got that message, you know, from the two ladies. I think one of them was in remission for cancer. And
no, sorry. I know. I thought you were going to talk about the stripper story, but the cancer story.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about the stripper story, Nelson. But no, there was a lady that's in remission, I think, for lung cancer or something, and she had a great time. And you would think with someone with that, she'd literally just come out. She may be like more concerned about the jokes going out, but actually, it's usually the people with the bigger challenges are just like, yeah, let's have a laugh.
That was
put us in that place though. So like a lot of the stuff you're saying is very abstract. So why don't you put me in the place? So there was a lady in the audience, and she had remission. She was
in remission. Okay, right. I'll just go from the beginning. So we ran a gig. We used to run it in like the main room of the bar, and then we're now upstairs, and it was on Thursday evenings. And it was like a studenty kind of night. And then very occasionally it'd be mixed with like payday as well. So sometimes it's very laddie. Usually it's quite studenty, plus maybe a couple of older people as well. And these two sort of like, when I say older, I mean over the age of 21. So these two like older people came along, got a table, and like obviously were a little bit different and stuff. And it was clear that she'd obviously been ill. And so like the whole evening you're spent being like, okay, don't say anything about like bad. Don't say anything about diseases. Don't say anything about death. Keep everything friendly. Keep everything fun. Keep everything.
How did you find out that she was ill?
She sent a message afterwards, but it was like she had a headscarf and stuff. So like it was, as in like you could visibly see that she'd probably been ill.
Got it. Okay. So
does that make sense?
Visibly, so you made a snap judgment and you saw that she looked ill? Is that
a friend told us. She messaged us.
Before the show?
She messaged after the show. At the show, she was in like a headscarf. So like, you know, the headscarf that people typically who have had chemotherapy will wear because obviously they've had to have. So like she was wearing one of those, and I thought, well, you know, she's either, you know, that's either what she wears or chances are she's probably been a bit unwell. And I find it really interesting with people like that, because you spend the whole evening being like, okay, make sure that nothing is da 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 da, and actually, or like nothing is too close to like their line, don't say anything offensive, and actually it's always the people like that who just like, oh yeah, we had a really, really good show tonight, it was fantastic, and we really enjoyed all of it. And it will be typically people you'd be like, oh yeah, they're up for a laugh. They would then be like, oh, we didn't like the jokes about A, B, or C. Yeah. And I find that really strange, but I find like almost like a contradiction, because I would always assume it'd be the other way around.
If you have anything you'd like to add in regards to how you come up with how you know like something's gonna work, or anything that's behind the mask, if there is a mask. But whilst you explain your answer, I also had a way of making sense of what you've just said. So I'll wait for you to speak first, and then
yeah, I think I mean, a lot of it is.
So maybe I can write this a little better. So you had a lot of statements that you made. Like, first you need to figure out how you write. Work out what you write. What does that mean? Like, work out. How do you work out what you write? What does that mean?
So that means, I mean, for me personally, that is your process, and people's processes are different. So, for example, Nelson, for a good example, is a great example. Is that he'll have a topic that he likes or doesn't like, and he'll write a joke about it, and he'll write that joke over and over and over and over again, and then eventually, after say however many months, he'll have like a finished article. For me, I only talk about stuff which affects me, and it will usually have like a negative affectation in my life, and then I want to turn it into a positive. And so it's I guess a little bit a form of therapy, and also just trying to make light of a situation which may be more serious. Other people might purely just write literally just like jokes, and that's also fine as well. But and whatever those processes might be, but the like crowd work or improvisation or anything like this is just writing very, very quick, and it's just relying on your instinct. So you're just literally doing what you usually do, but just exceptionally quickly based on a certain set of circumstances. And so it's literally you plus other person equals joke for that gig. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, for example, like the way I write is I'll have like a topic, and then I'll ask a ton of questions about it. Like, why would that happen? How would that happen? Like, what would it look like? Blah, 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 right? And so in order for me to translate my writing into crowd work, I would basically have to see someone out there and go, oh, he has a red hat. Why would he have a red hat? What would possess him to have a red hat? Why does that red hat have MAGA on it? What does MAGA stand for, right? Like, so I'm thinking all that, and then I just say it instead of writing. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
I was gonna say, sorry to cut you off. I was gonna say it's the same process that you're describing. It's just that he does it at a way faster rate. So all those questions that you've gone through, he will do the same process at like, like that's where it becomes more instinct and less intellect, because he has done it so many times. His brain just sees information, and then the joke is there. So what I was going to say is that, like, it's like sport in a way. You've taken these punches so many times, or these shots so many times, that when you're in the situation, your muscle memory for writing jokes is so on point that you know exactly what to do. And with Alex's persona is that Alex knows his comedy voice very well. So he doesn't second guess himself in that situation when he sees an opportunity to create crowd work per se, So because his voice is something that, like, you write everything based on who you are. So it's all just, you don't need to think like, who am I when you're on stage? You already know. So everything just comes out faster because you don't need to edit yourself too much in regards to, oh, does this fit my voice? Does this fit my persona?
Yeah.
It just comes out naturally because it's all written from within, like it's his writing process. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think Nelson literally just explains it in a way, like he just explained what I tried to say over the course of an hour in about 1 minute. And I think that's probably the element which I've definitely missed out. And that's probably because I am completely self-centered and narcissistic. So I know what my range is. I tried to say it when I was like, I'm low status. So I know the effect that I have on like most scenarios within a gig. And I know what will usually be like downhill and what will also probably be like a good thing. And once you've sort of figured out like your process and where you stand in relation to other people. So for example, if I meet a group of like alpha males at a gig, I know that all they think about probably is like bench pressing me. So I will know what my route with them is. With women, I am not probably what they probably describe as their typical sexual fantasy / a threat. So I know where I stand with them. So when I was talking earlier about like stereotyping or making snap judgments of people, I don't mean literally be like, oh my God, look at that, it's a dickhead. I mean, what is that person in relation to me if I met them in the street? And what do I think that they would think about me if they met me in the street? And you just sort of go on that stereotype of what that conversation would be, and then you have your answer. So as soon as you do that, that's when you can start making some progress. But it also has its limitations as well. So it means for me, I struggle to do certain kinds of material which would perhaps be more intellectual / maybe slightly more serious, because I'm very low status and I'm quite gesturing. So if I were to ever, if I were to ever do material and say like the Black Lives Matter stuff, not that I would, because I have no real relation to it because I'm white and I live in the countryside and I know nothing about statues, then it becomes more difficult for me because I've already sort of pigeonholed myself as a certain kind of like comedian or person. In sort of maybe like a similar way, do you work in an office? No, you're a pharmacist. Nelson works in an office, right?
I work in an office.
Yeah. Right. You know that guy in your office, and he has a very sort of straightforward personality. He might just be all about like alcohol and girls. And then for one random day, one random reason, he wants to start talking about Brexit, and like the ideas are so freshly formed in his head, like he's just sort of like bubbling spit, like words are sort of coming out as like slightly unformed. It's like that, because that's not my speciality. My speciality is hopefully trying to make people sort of have fun and have a good time, and hopefully not take themselves too seriously.
Know thyself. That's the lesson for today. Yeah. Know thyself.
Amen. Or whatever denomination.
You found your voice first, and you found your character, and then you're like, well, I can insert this character into every situation now because I know it's like Kramer. It's like you can insert Kramer into, a shopping spree or a riot or like working, and you just know exactly how he's going to act and think and what he's going to say, right? So you know yourself so much that you could see a doctor and be like, well, this is exactly how I would act. I don't know anything about medicine. I'm poor, right? You're thinking all low status stuff. And then so it's more like, okay, well, I'll go self-deprecation and that works, right? Okay. I got you.
Sure. I think the only other thing as well is and then we must move on, is that your voice changes, obviously, depending on like what happens in your life as well. So I had like a really big moment when my dad died during my Edinburgh run. Last one I did was 2-3 years ago, so 2018, I think. Okay. And I found it really difficult to do a lot of the material I did before because that scenario, as it would anyone, it ages you. It makes you more mature, and you have to deal with like a whole range of new emotions that you wouldn't usually deal with. And so I found it a really weird learning experience as a comedian, because I went from essentially like infant comedian boy to part-time employed comedian man with this issue. And I think what some comedians definitely, I'm only talking my level's not like massively good or anything like that. I'm talking like a local up and coming semi-pro, sometimes pro level, is you'll see comedians get stuck in their same routine and their same thing, like gig after gig, month after month, year after year, and they never really develop because they're like, oh my God, I found my comedy voice. And they will literally be that until the world explodes, Martians arrive, coronavirus kills everybody, etc., etc. And I think it's also really important that you keep challenging what your comedic voice is. So making sure that you maybe write about stuff that you wouldn't usually write about. So although I joke about being like, oh, Black Lives Matter or coronavirus, that's actually a really good topic if you're not that kind of comedian to actually try and write about, because it will make you grow. And even if the jokes are shit, it still makes you consider that kind of stuff, and it sort of moves you towards that kind. It just gives you hopefully another weapon in your armory. So I think it's important not to stay safe as well, because you can do that, and then you'll be like, wow, I'm the equivalent of a Smurf, and I will only joke like this, blah blah blah. And like, I think it's really important that you keep challenging yourself with different material, with different ideas, and also because you're not the same person every day. You're different. You are different to what you were yesterday and a week ago, and you'll be different in a week's time. So I think your comedy should reflect that as well.
What you said is what I've been going through, man. Like I'm trying to change. Like I think about my set, and I start thinking like the days where we started 7 years ago and how it's slowly changed, but like there's so much to pick apart, you know, and also because the development is so hard to gauge. You can do 10 minutes that is really good in January, but by July it's now shade. You know, there's so many variables that like you have to consider, and the whole idea of not holding on to material is really crucial, because even if you don't notice it, the jokes may start to lose that sting. Because
sure. And there's also, and it relates to crowd work as well. And we've got a really good gig, which is an example of this, Nelson, which every year we do a freshers gig in September. And we first started doing that gig like when I was 23. And so when I first hosted that, I was just simply a graduate hosting a gig. And then this year we did it. I find it amazing because they're an arts uni, so they're very liberal-minded and they're very up-to-date. So they were, when I was at uni, you didn't hear a lot about like gender fluidity and gender pronouns and veganism, etc., etc. When I got to uni, I think I suddenly found out what a bisexual person was, and that was it. So like uni has changed, like that social culture's changed so much since then. So when I first did that gig at 23, it was just basically like I was at uni. And then I did that gig last year as a 26-year-old adult man, and like I was treating it like I was only sort of a couple of years older than them. And then suddenly halfway through the gig, I was like, no, I must literally look like, if not an uncle, like an older cousin. Like, and that's just so important in terms of crowd work, that you make sure that you recognize what you are to those people, because I think they probably thought I was some sort of supply teacher. Like, no, I'm not now like a cool like person in their year. I am like, probably a teaching assistant, you know, that's got distracted and wants to tell everybody else off by like holding like a comedy gig on a Tuesday at 8:00. And that's really important. And I think that's really important in relation to crowd work as well, that you know what you are in relation to the person and how that changes as well.
How do you find that out? How do you find out what you are in relation to the person, in relation to the crowd? Like, how did you find that you're like low status, or however you came up with your voice?
Oh, well, I've always just sort of had this. So I already knew that, because in pretty much every social group I'm in, like I'm not the cool characteristic which makes up like that social group. Like whether that is Christmas, group of friends, wedding, party, funeral, etc. Like I've always been like this kind of form. So for me, it was logical that that would be the same with comedy. I don't think, for me, my social representation hasn't changed that much. But right, getting myself into a hole. So my status hasn't changed with different groups of people, but my relation to different groups of people has changed. So a little bit like, have you got a cousin that you knew, say, a few years ago that was like a baby?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And now it's been a few years since then, and now your cousin maybe is like 8 or 9.
Right. Yeah.
And your relationship to that cousin basically like changed. So I've got a cousin like that as well that I met when I was like 2 or 3, and we had a good time and we played a bit. And then like 4 years later, I met them again. They had no idea who I was. I had to create essentially like a new friendship with them and like scrap the old one completely because it's completely out of date. So 4 years ago, I think I was playing with like an action man to try and entertain it. And now it had like opinions and was hungry and was thirsty and blah, blah, blah. And you have to like scrap the whole thing again. So my social status with that cousin, God, man, you're gonna have to do some editing. Right. My social status with that cousin obviously doesn't change. My social standings change, but I also know my relationship with that person has now changed as well. So that's changed, but my social standing hasn't changed. But I have to create a new form for that. Does that make sense at all? We'll probably cut that out. It's probably right, but it's way too long-winded. And it's 11 o'clock, and I'm broken. I'm a little bit broken.
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to stress you out. But I'm just genuinely interested in how this works.
This is good because what you just revealed is an element that we can that the listeners can explore into, because that is a very good example. Before we finish, let me just tell the stripper story. So since this is an episode about crowd work, right? Here's an example of when crowd work went wrong. I was the one doing the hosting this time, and like Alex was gonna perform, but like as the host that night, I saw that we had strippers in the crowd. And what do you do with these strippers in a comedy shows? You talk to, you make stripper jokes, but these particular...
Why? Oh my God.
The strippers.
It is like, when I was more normal at the beginning of this podcast, when I was like, oh, you isolate different elements of a room. This is like a classic Nelson failing.
This is when crowd work goes wrong. So don't ever do this. Don't, because I learned the hard way that, don't make stripper jokes, because when they went outside, they started making phone calls to some dudes.
Oh no.
This is the difference between like mine and Nelson's brain. Because I saw the strippers and I was like, oh my God, they got pimps. Pimps have guns. Pimps have drugs. You're going to prison. You're going to die. You can't handle prison. Nelson was like, oh my God, there are strippers. I like sex. Strippers have sex. We should have sex. Joke.
It was something. But let's just say they started making some phone calls, and damn, I would never make a stripper joke. I ended up tied down in a back seat of a car and was kidnapped.
Well, okay. So Alex, you say you have, why couldn't you do like low status jokes with these strippers? Like that would be non-confrontational, and it would be it would run in.
Yeah, no, I totally could if that wasn't perhaps like a limitation that I have in terms, like my family is very conservative, so we don't talk about being naked or sex or this or that. So
you're still saying
yeah, like we could have done, but it would have just sounded weird, okay? Like I would have tried to say something funny, and then all that would have happened, I would have just been like, have you ever done a blowjob? And it would have just like, that would have been it. Like I would have just got all sweaty, like it just wouldn't have helped.
Hi guys, listen, we're gonna wrap up soon, but it has been an absolute pleasure, Mr. Alexander Oliver. Let us know where we can find you, where future listeners can look you up and what you're up to, etc.
Yeah, sure. You can find me at Alex Oliver Comic on Facebook. I will post something after 3 years before they find me. But yeah, you can find me on there. I'm on Twitter as well, same handle, same problem. But yeah, I mean, I'll be around. So just send a message if you. I mean, I'll see you guys when coronavirus is over. You know, so stay safe until then, and treasure this old yellow background podcast. What's your podcast called as well?
How to be funny.
How to be funny. Great. Well, we crushed that this evening.
They keep asking all these questions because the people want to know, man. This is gold.
Oh yeah. Well, in summary, find your voice and panic. I think that's the thing I forgot to mention was I panic a lot, and that usually that produces something at the end, like Panic Factory. I'm basically like the human equivalent of a rape alarm, but like on a humorous setting. Okay, you know, my mum. Nelson, did I tell you this? My mum got me a rape alarm for Christmas. Not this year before. And I still got it, so I don't know where it is. But anyway, on the packet, I've kept it like it's gonna I've sell it on eBay like 20 years, right? On the packet, it says perfect for seniors, joggers, and single people. So I was sending this being like, because I'm single. So at the time I was single. Apparently I don't need it anymore because I'm not. But I was just like, what a weird thing to write on a package. Because I got like the joggers and I got the senior people, but I didn't really get single people. Because if I committed regular sexual assaults, like I wouldn't be like, I may be a sexual assault person, but I'm not a home wrecker. Like that would not be, that wouldn't be a thought process that I would have. I would just be like, I'm really horny in an alleyway. Look, we can isolate one. Anyway. But like,
I feel like if we leave that joke at the end, that's a perfect way to finish. Because if they listened all this way through, they'll definitely find that funny.
Oh yeah.
I have a better question though. Like, you think it's weird what's written on the actual rape whistle? I just think it's weird that your mom got you a rape whistle.
Oh yeah, no, totally. But like, also, no, because it's not. I tell you what, mom. I mean, like, it is obviously really weird. Up until the point she said to me, she's like, "You're out a lot late at night, and I don't want to be worried about you," which is really sweet. That's a really nice thing to say. Apart from, I'm like in my mid-20s, and you're nearly retired, so like, I'm not like a vulnerable like 17-year-old girl who's just had her first ever drink and got like a legal ID. I'm like a guy with a car that needs to shave once a week. So I'm not even the target demographic, but I kind of like it. That means that she obviously thinks that to the outside world, I'm obviously incredibly attractive. And so she must think my life is very different. I'm just walking down the street, just inundated with opportune people that commit sexual assault, you know, and finally I've got that rape whistle.